Okay, so you want to run the Chicago outfit. It's 1927 and you're inheriting the most profitable business in America, $105 million this year, over $1.5 billion in today's money, and to this day, the largest annual income ever recorded by a single private citizen. Nobody in nearly a century has beaten your year. Your product is beer nobody's allowed to brew and whiskey nobody's allowed to sell in a country that banned both 7 years ago. And that ban is the entire business because the law didn't kill the demand for a drink, it only killed your competition. You've got gambling houses, brothels, protection routes, hundreds of front companies across an entire American city. You've got cops on the payroll, judges on the payroll, city hall on the payroll, and none of it is treated as a scandal because inside this business, it's just a line item. One gambling shop you owned in Cicero, one storefront the size of a barbershop, cleared over $350,000 in a single year, which is the salary of the President of the United States 4 times over, out of one room. And the whole machine runs on a single rule: no paper, no bank account, no deed, nothing in your name, nothing signed, ever. An empire built to be invisible to accounting itself. So before you take the job, you should see the books. This is the real balance sheet of the Chicago outfit, what it earned, what it cost to stay alive, and why the math was always going to win. Your business is born at midnight, January 16, 1920. The Volstead Act takes effect, and alcohol becomes a federal crime in all 48 states. America just closed one of its biggest consumer industries, the breweries, the distilleries, the corner saloons, gone overnight. Now, imagine every coffee shop in your city shut down by law tomorrow, while every coffee drinker still wakes up wanting coffee. The demand doesn't vanish, it just loses its legal suppliers. So whoever still sells coffee inherits every customer in the city at any price, with no licenses, no taxes, and no competitors, because being a competitor is now a felony. Before the ban, brewing was a knife fight of thin margins. Beer was cheap because 100 breweries kept undercutting each other. After the ban, the survivors set the price. In the mid-20s Chicago beer trade, a barrel cost around $4.50 to brew and sold to a speakeasy for $55, 12 times cost, and the difference isn't better beer, it's the price of the risk. Since you're the one organized enough to absorb that risk, the entire spread flows to you. How many speakeasies did Chicago end up with? Depending on whose count you believe, 1,000, 6,000, 10,000? Nobody knows, and that's the point, because this was an economy built to be uncountable. The architecture belongs to Johnny Torrio, the man who understood that prohibition wasn't a crime opportunity, it was an industry, and industries need management, not gunmen. In 1924, the profits of the Cicero operation split 5 ways. 18% to a collector for Torrio and Diano Banyan, another 18% through a second man, 5% to the manager, and 41% to you, Al Capone, which makes this less a gang and more a partnership with a cap table. By 1927, the whole enterprise runs on one formula: a third of net profits to senior employees, 1/6 each to you and your 3 partners. Jack Guzik handles finance. He signs the checks, he moves the money, and he holds a job title that doesn't exist at General Motors: the political fixer. Ralph Capone, your brother, handles beer, the breweries, the trucks, the distribution. Frank Nito handles whiskey, Canadian liquor coming down, industrial alcohol cleaned and cut. 4 divisions: manufacturing, imports, entertainment, and government relations. Below them, it looks like any mid-sized company, because it is one. The flagship gambling house in Cicero employs 40 to 50 people: cashiers, telegraph operators pulling race results off a leased wire, floormen with 300 to 500 customers on a good day. Your kid brother works the floor for $25 a day. Payroll goes out daily in cash, and monthly overhead for that one location, salaries, rent, phone, wire service, runs $24,622 in June of 1925. Headquarters is a hotel. First, the Metropole, an 8-room corner suite at $1,200 to $1,500 a week, paid in cash from a roll in your pocket. Then, July 30th, 1928, the whole organization moves to the Lexington, where 20 men check in at once and not one of them signs the register. The clerk signs for them, and you go on the books as George Phillips. Even the tailoring is operational. Marshall Field cuts you 23 custom suits at $135 each, a workman's monthly wage per suit, every one with a special reinforced pocket built for the revolver. That's the product side, a vertically integrated beverage company where even the uniforms are load-bearing. So where does $100 million a year actually come from? 5 layers. Beer is the volume business, that $4.50 to $55 spread multiplied across a city. A single mid-sized operation could move 1,000 barrels a week in season, over $50,000 a week gross in an economy where a school teacher earned $1,500 a year. Beer is your utility revenue, steady, scheduled, delivered by truck like milk. Spirits are Nito's division, whiskey from Canada or industrial alcohol redistilled and cut. Smaller volume, fatter margin per bottle. Gambling is where the numbers get vivid. The Hawthorne Smoke Shop and Cicero runs horse betting in front, roulette, craps, and 21 in the back, and in its first 8 months of 1924, it nets $300,225.95. Across 24 months, $587,721.95, and that's net after those $24,622 expense sheets from one storefront.
Vice is the part the movies romanticize and the numbers make cold. The Hawthorne Inn, your roadhouse in Stickney, keeps daily accounts on printed forms, a column for each woman, her nightly income, the house is cut. The house takes 50%, then charges her 10% of the rest under a heading the form calls towel service. It comes to $6,398 in 18 days, about $128,000 a year from one roadhouse, and an operation running several. And when a business prints custom accounting stationery for its brothels, that's not chaos, that's administration. And then everything else, slot machines, protection, dog tracks, handled by Sam Guzik, Jock's younger brother, whose bank accounts alone move $185,164 in 2 years. Now, the problem nobody warns you about, every dollar of this arrives as cash, physical currency in cigar boxes and safes, and cash has to move. So watch the plumbing. The cashier accumulates the surplus, walks it to the Pinker State Bank in Cicero, and converts it into cashier's checks under a fake name, J.C. Dunbar. $224,704 through that one fake name in 2 years. A courier named Bobby Barton collects the checks and delivers them to Guzik. And when you winter in Miami, the money follows by Western Union, $72,380 in wires to another invented man, A. Costa. So, fake names, cashier's checks, couriers, wires. Remember the rule, no paper. This business this size can't actually run on zero paper. It can only choose whose name the paper carries. Hold that thought. Everything you've seen so far is illegal, openly illegal. The Hawthorne Smoke Shop wasn't hidden in a basement. It was a ground floor storefront on 22nd Street with 300 to 500 customers a day. So the real question isn't how the outfit made money, it's how it operated in daylight for years without being shut down.
The answer is a single line in your own books, and it's worth slowing all the way down for because it might be the most honest line in the history of American corruption. Watch where every dollar of smoke shop profit goes in 1925 and 1926. This is the distribution list. Frank Pope, the manager, 18%. Peter Penovich, who ran the games, 5%. Ralph Capone, 5%. Al Capone, 52%. And one more line sitting between the manager and the boss, written into the profit split like any other partner. Cicero town officials for graft protection, 20%. 20%, 4 times the games manager's share. Across 2 years of profit, that line comes to roughly $117,000, enough to buy 3 waterfront mansions in Miami Beach out of one storefront's protection budget. The town doesn't take bribes, the town owns 20%. And it runs all the way down. The paying teller at the Pinkard Bank, the man cashing your fake name checks, gets a present of $15 a week, a workman's whole wage, just to keep serving the Dunbar account with a smile. It's the same reason Penovich went into business with your brother in the first place, not for Ralph's charm, but because Ralph could fix the police, the state attorney, the mayor, the sheriff. Fixing isn't a favor you call in, it's a capability you buy a partner for. But protection is only half money. The other half is fear. And one afternoon in May 1925 shows both halves working. A citizens' association led by a local minister, Reverend Hoover, raids the Hawthorne smoke shop with sheriff's deputies. You show up in your pajamas, take the cash out of the register in front of them, and tell the Reverend, this is the last raid you'll ever pull. One raider gets his nose broken crossing the street. Another, a machinist named David Morgan, is ambushed at his garage a few nights later, shot and left for dead. He survives, and he never testifies. The gambling case gets dismissed for lack of evidence, and the shop reopens half an hour after the raid. And it was the last raid they ever pulled because that's what the 20% actually buys, not the absence of law, just the absence of consequences. Now, the mechanism behind all the blood, and it's economics, not savagery. Go back to that 1924 profit split and notice who else was on it. 36% flowing to John Torrio and Dion O'Banion, your partners. By the 1925 split, they're gone, and your share has grown from 41% to 52%. And what happened in between wasn't a renegotiation. In November 1924, O'Banion was murdered in his flower shop. 2 months later, Torrio was shot outside his home, survived, and retired to Italy. The cap table didn't get amended, it got edited. Here's the rule underneath. Every normal industry runs on institutions you never think about. A rival steals your shipment, you sue. A customer won't pay, you take them to court. A competitor moves on your territory, you file a complaint or cut prices. An illegal industry has none of that. No courts, no contracts, no trademarks, and the police are what you're hiding from or renting. So every dispute a lawsuit would normally settle has exactly one enforcement mechanism left, because in a market with no courts, violence is what contract enforcement looks like. That's why the beer wars happened. Not because bootleggers were uniquely savage men, but because a 12 times margin with no legal way to defend it must be defended some other way. And it escalates by design. Every dead rival makes the survivor's monopoly more valuable, which makes the next dispute worth more, which makes the next killing more likely. The margin funds the war, and the war protects the margin. But violence has a cost curve, and it bends the wrong way. April 26, 1926, an assistant state attorney named William McSwiggan is machine-gunned in Cicero, and you get the blame. For the first time, the heat doesn't stay bought. The smoke shop closes that same night, and the cashier is sent back for the $84,000 sitting in the safe. 17 years of an average salary in one box, which he hands to Guzik and Nito at a hotel. The manager, Frank Pope, asks for his 18% of it and is told to wait. And he waits the rest of his life, because even inside the machine, when things get hot, the contracts stop being honored. Nothing was ever holding them up but the calm. Then, February 14th, 1929, 7 men lined against a garage wall on North Clark Street and machine-gunned, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Nobody is ever convicted, but it doesn't matter, because the real price isn't legal. The city that tolerated you becomes the city demanding your head. The Chicago Crime Commission invents a brand new title just for you, Public Enemy Number 1. And in Washington, the President of the United States starts asking for progress reports on a tax case with your name on it. That's the monopoly problem. The violence that builds the monopoly is the same violence that finally makes you too expensive to protect. 1927 was the good year, and there will not be another one. Now, let me tell you how I know all of this. The splits, the graft line, the towel service, the $24,622 expense sheet. None of it is legend, because every number in this episode comes from one file. And the story of how that file came to exist is the story of how your empire dies. In 1927, the Supreme Court decides a case called Sullivan, and the ruling sounds almost like a joke. Illegal income is still taxable, which means a bootlegger can be prosecuted not for bootlegging, but for failing to declare it. In May 1930, the IRS Intelligence Unit sends a special agent named Frank Wilson to Chicago, reporting up to a president who was personally following the case. Wilson's problem is the rule you set at the top. His own report puts it plainly. The defendant had no bank accounts, kept no book records of activities, bought no property in his own name, and conducted all of his financial dealings with currency only. It's an income tax case with no income on paper, and for months it goes nowhere. Then comes the accident. Wilson is digging through storage, old evidence, miscellaneous seizures, and in what he calls a miscellaneous lot of apparently unimportant papers, he finds a cloth-bound book with no markings. Nobody had ever realized what it was. It had been sitting in the government's own files since the night of the McSwiggan murder, seized in 1926, logged, forgotten. It's the Hawthorne Smoke Shop ledger, daily net profits, month by month, May 24 to April 26. Your books, the ones that were never supposed to exist. A ledger alone proves nothing. Someone has to say whose it was. The handwriting gets compared against known samples until it matches a bookkeeper named Leslie Shumway, who vanished in 1926, and 4 months of searching finds him in Miami in February 1931, where he identifies the book page by page, initialing each sheet. Then the bank plumbing. Agents match the penmanship on the Pinker's cashier's checks and prove J.C. Dunbar is the gambling house cashier, Fred Reese, arrested with a letter in his hand delivered minutes earlier containing instructions and money to flee to California. And then the third document, which is the one you'd least expect. Your own tax lawyer, negotiating a settlement, puts your share, 1/6 of the syndicate, in a letter, in writing, to the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The no-paper empire, finished off by exactly 3 pieces of paper: a bookkeeper's ledger, a bank teller's checks, and a lawyer's letter. You don't go quietly, the file records that too. An informant reports a plan to bring 5 gunmen from New York to kill Wilson, the prosecutor, and 2 investigators, and your own organization forces you to call it off because killing federal agents is bad for business. Days before trial, your people obtain the secret list of 100 prospective jurors and start working through it. Bribes, favors, messages to relatives, so on. So on the morning of trial, Judge Wilkerson swaps the entire 100-man panel for a fresh one. In the courtroom, your bodyguard sits behind you with a loaded revolver as witness after witness suddenly can't remember a thing, and the judge later calls the defense testimony perjury on its face. None of it matters because the numbers are already in evidence. October 17, 1931. Guilty. 11 years, a $50,000 fine, plus $7,692 in costs, and the bill that started it all, $215,080.48 in back taxes. One last piece of math. The legend said $100 million a year, but the government, with its ledger, its checks, its letter, could prove $1,038,655.84, 6 years of income combined, about 1% of a single legendary year. That gap is the true size of no paper. They never found the empire, only the crack in it. The outfit's books were closed. So, Do you still want to run the Chicago outfit? Then understand what it actually was, because it was never a story about one scarred man in a $135 suit. Prohibition created a market with no courts, where every institution that makes ordinary business boring, contracts, lawsuits, licenses, banks, was stripped out and had to be repurchased privately. Courts replaced by gunmen, regulators replaced by a 20% graft line, banks replaced by fake names and couriers. The famous violence and the famous corruption weren't excesses of the business, they were the business, the operating costs of an industry Congress created in a single midnight. And that's why the math always wins. An empire of cash still needs one bookkeeper, one teller, one lawyer, and the moment it touches paper, it belongs to whoever finds the paper. Capone never lost a gang war. He lost a paperwork war to an accountant, over 0.2% of a single year's revenue.
Remember that next time a product gets banned. Any product, any era. The demand survives. The margin explodes. The courts vanish. And this exact balance sheet starts writing itself again, with new names in the old columns. Subscribe if you want the next set of books opened, because the math always wins, and somebody always writes the numbers down. Thanks.